Innovation Officer from eRepublic, and John Spurko, Senior Executive Architect from ServiceNow, for a conversation on the evolving role of an IT leader. Dustin, John, over to you.
Hi there, I'm Dustin Heisler, Chief Innovation Officer for eRepublic, the parent company of government technology, and I'm going to be facilitating today's fireside chat on the evolving role of the IT leader. We know in this age of continuous disruption and digital transformation, we've really seen IT leaders increasingly acting as brokers and even serving as intermediaries internally and externally. This shift in IT leadership requires continuous committed engagement with the business side of the organization and intelligent management of services and portfolios. So in our fireside chat today, we're going to dive into all of that, how to embrace and master this critical new role in IT leadership. And today I'm excited to be joined by John Spurko, the Senior Executive Architect for ServiceNow. John, thanks so much for carving some time out to join our discussion.
Sure, Dustin, thanks for having me. Really look forward to the conversation together.
It's going to be a fun one. So let's start first with digital transformation. We know under the role of the IT leader, IT's been tasked with digitally transforming now faster than ever. But let's start with just what does digital transformation really mean to you now in this new era that we're in?
Yeah, it seems sort of obvious because I've been running into this a lot, but still, I still feel like a lot of people aren't getting it, especially in traditional IT organizations. But it's the way of getting things done more efficiently to reach a desired outcome, and really taking a lot of the constraints away that used to be there of we have to put our server in, we have to put our apps on it, and just opening it up to everything. And there's a lot of new ways to do things, and you have to be really versed in those things. And I think digital transformation, besides upsetting the market like you always do, right? This digital disruption, I think we're really looking for that cleaner way to do things as well. And that's what it means to me.
Yeah, I think that's a great way to explain it. So is this just another round of shared services kind of coming back, or is there a little bit more at the table for this one?
Yeah, that's a good question. It does look like that on the surface, right? If you just look at it, it looks like, oh yeah, we're doing what we did 15 years ago and we're trying to share more services. I think the big difference here though is there's options is one thing. There's a lot of ways that people, if they don't like what you're giving them anymore as a service, they can go at it and get it somewhere else. And they're doing that all the time. Especially in the age of COVID, we saw a lot of that, right? Where the mayor's office, the mayor said, I need this thing tomorrow and I'm not going to go to IT because it takes forever. So just get it done how you have to. And a lot of times we did see some people getting brought in from IT, the people that were really the get it done type of people. But there certainly was no tolerance for doing things the old way and waiting for 6 months to get started with some areas. So it's been really interesting to watch and to see the speed the government can actually move when they have to get these apps out there and get these services out there. And
yeah, absolutely. We heard that common thread that you had 3 years worth of work that was done in a matter of months. But I think one point you made there is really good, and that's the fact that IT wasn't always the driver behind some of these new solutions that were deployed, but you had line of business that was going out, and if they needed something, sometimes they just deployed it on their own.
Yeah, exactly. Yep, and I think now the big thing is it's really instead of a push where you're saying, hey, we're going to save money, so we're going to share all these services. That pull, I think, is the big difference, where IT has to stand up a good service that people want to use. And there is competition now where there wasn't before. I think that's the big point too.
Absolutely. And I think now as we enter this kind of post-pandemic era, or whatever this era is of uncertainty, it's going to be more important than ever to reconcile, all of these new capabilities that were deployed. And I think, one thing that we've talked about previously is just the changing nature of IT leadership and IT leaders now being brokers. And I'd love for you to maybe break that down for our audience. What does that mean today?
Yeah, I like what you say, clean up the mess from the chaos is a big part of that last piece. But what we're seeing a lot is the CIOs are getting brought in to say, what should I use, right? And there's these things the CIOs are saying, this is what IT offers, but here's what some of the external, a lot of cloud providers, what they have to offer in these areas. And what they're doing is really assembling that package for them, where it's not really delivering the app anymore, but it's getting, hey, I have this external service that I'm using. We need to attach my single sign-on to it. Hey, I can get you guys a better deal if you all come in because we have facilities in HR running on this same app that they both need, and we could share the contract. So there's brokering from centralizing the vendors. We see a lot of that in where the CIOs become the center of that, or CIO's organization. And then also bringing those contracts in and the different people, so the contract management, the vendor management, and then the assembly of that final deliverable that you need to present the outcome that whatever those different agencies are looking for. So that broker role is really different than, somebody, if you think about even 5 years ago, hey, I have this problem, here's the app I want to run, can you put it on a server for me? And it's really, we don't see that much of that anymore. Now it's really just facilitating that outcome using some other means that makes more sense than that.
Absolutely. And it seems like, we're kind of going back to some of the basics, laying some of the foundational elements that needed to be in place even prior to the pandemic itself. What are you seeing here? Is it kind of a return to some of that foundational groundwork that needs to be done? Is that kind of this new brokerage model?
Yeah, I have kind of crazy idea on this. I'm going to share it. But what I see is, I worked on a startup. I had my own startup a while back. And when you have a startup, you have this idea for, usually it's going to be a service you're providing now. You have the Ubers, the Airbnbs. And with that startup, there's the CEO, and you need money, you need people, and you need that person with the drive, the passion to make that service really go to market. And I see a lot of that happening now, where the center of that deliverable is the service. People are starting to think like that, instead of, hey, I need 3 VMs for that, or I need to spin up, a website for that. It's not really that much anymore, but it's really, creating that almost like a mini org to deliver a service. We did that for drive-up testing at one of our major cities. I think I could say Los Angeles. So we had a 44-hour window to stand up a drive-up testing app when they were going to do testing for COVID. And what we had to do is we had to really come up with, hey, you're the center of the world, you're making all the decisions, because a lot of times that gets, depending on what you need, is a technical piece, it is a contract piece, but you need to have that center of that service owner. And then the organization kind of builds around them, right? All the different enablement pieces. So it's getting like those mini startups, instead of everybody pointing fingers and you got to go 10 places and there's nobody really running the show. That service owner has become a really pivotal role, especially in the age of COVID, like you said, the age of chaos, like you called it earlier.
Yeah, no, I think it's a really good point. I mean, it's like government as a service. Everyone is focused on that service experience, the service delivery, and less on kind of what is necessary to enable that. Now, I guess the big question here is, how does this change the role of the IT leaders in the process? I mean, they've gone through some rapid shifts. A lot of pressure has been put on them now more than ever. Bring cybersecurity into the mix. There's a lot of pressure on this IT leadership role. So what do you see here changing for them going forward?
What I'm seeing is that there's a couple of things happening. A lot of people in IT, we see there's people in services organizations in IT. Sometimes there's a service team, a digital service delivery team created within IT. I also see a lot of the people that ran the application teams before that are really stepping up into this role. And they're becoming, I think a few years ago, they were saying the CIO now has a seat at the table with the executive management, and they're making business decisions. It has to be more than the CIO. The CIO can't go there alone and then come back and tell everybody what to do. And I think there's still a good part of the people that are waiting to be told what to do. But the ones that are stepping up, they're actually the ones that are facilitating those conversations with the business. So we are seeing that kind of cross-pollination where there's ownership on both sides, and it's kind of a co-owned thing, instead of just saying, kicking over to the fence to IT and saying, run that app, and it kind of all lands in the lap of IT. It's becoming more of where that IT has that constant back and forth, and they're meeting, the leaders in IT are meeting with the people in the business as much as they are with the people on their teams. It should almost be that 50-50. And I think it gets back to that too, the people that are stepping up into those service owner roles. So a lot of times it's the DCIO or the DCIO -1 that are stepping up into those roles and really facilitating those conversations with the business. I think before they used to leave it up to the business analysts and a lot of the PMO, if they had formalized PMOs. That was all on their side, and they would have the conversations with the business. IT would stand up, and then the PMO would go away, and they kind of leave a little gap there, right? Because nobody owned that on the business side going forward. And then a lot of times IT got stuck with it, and that's how things kind of fall down over time, because that initial release is over and the PMO sponsor, the business sponsor, kind of moved on. So I think now what we're starting to see is that role getting filled more, and it co-owned between the business and the IT side.
Yeah, I think it's a great observation. And when you look at even some of the like new federal legislation and funding that's coming down the line, IT is playing that brokerage role there when it comes to orchestrating how those funds are applied and ultimately what you can do with it. Is that something you're also seeing on your side?
Absolutely. IT is becoming a lot more business savvy, and they're expected to, even when we develop services, one of the big things on a service is try to figure out how much it costs. And IT they weren't really good at talking about dollars and cents or caring about it for that matter. But even as we get into the realm of being more of a business manager, and in addition to the IT manager, right, having that dichotomy where you can kind of play on both sides, the dollars and cents comes in a lot, and that comes right along with those contracts and the vendors. Is what are we paying and what are we getting for it? And that's really what the IT manager is being tasked with. And if we're not getting a lot for it, being brave enough to say, let's get rid of that. Let's do it a different way, right? And that's really where you get into the digital transformation, is rethinking things. So as we got into these services, I worked with a couple managers, and they like, what are your first goals when you get these services? And a lot of people say, I want to work towards being able to do cost models so I can tell exactly how much all 40 to 70 services I'm delivering costs. And then I had another person say, I want to get a list so I can kill them. So I can kill the bottom stuff. We're doing so much things that, for 5 or 10 people, can we just get rid of some of that stuff and focus more on the important things? And without really being focused on services, they don't know what those things are in a lot of cases. They have this long tail of things that IT is doing, and it's just become untenable with all the new things they're being asked to do today.
Absolutely. So how are you seeing organizations kind of getting started as you think about focusing on services and some of those initial starting points? What are you seeing here?
A lot of times, what I'm seeing is I'm going in and working with a lot of central IT agencies. That's where I spend a lot of my time. And what I see is a DCIO that's put in charge of overseeing that overall service delivery piece. Which digital services are we delivering? What vendors are we going to use? And more importantly, who are you going to put in charge of those things? So a lot of times the DCIO, and ideally even the CIO, will come in and be part of a mini governance committee. Let's do 4 or 5 services. One thing that we always see as a mess, right? Just asset management, just doing asset management as an IT organization. How can we do asset management as a service so well with our IT assets that now we're being asked by facilities, and we're being asked to do vehicles, and we're being asked to do FEMA assets? Like, how do we get to that point where people trust us so much to do assets that we're moving into different asset classes? And that's really what we need to look at, is we need to get that service owner that runs the asset program or the asset service, whatever it turns into. Some are going to call it the digital product called asset management. And then have that person come in and speak to the CIO and the DCIO in sort of a governance committee, an oversight committee, if you will, and have them report on it. Have that one person responsible that really owns it and has the passion to deliver a real digital service there, just like you would, getting back to Uber or Airbnb. How do I get my assets like that and track my assets in that same way?
It's kind of like this platform approach that agencies really need to take, as they manage their services, their people, kind of the platform that they're enabling here. We've also talked a little bit about kind of the board dynamic that's at play here. IT has got to now, not just be at the table, but they also have to, these leaders have to help condition the boards with how to make investments in this. I'd love for you to maybe share a little bit of insight on those dynamics.
Absolutely. And the board too is getting more savvy in that they have a lot of their own ideas that they come to the table with in terms of the technology that they're using. And it's interesting too that the CIO is often coming in having to defend their position as opposed to making the recommendation like they used to. The board used to say, I don't really know anything, but now they're, hey, I saw this or I saw that. And I think it's a good thing that they're challenging the CIO to different things and bringing up different ideas. And it's more of a collaboration of how we use the services instead of the CIO just saying, oh yeah, this is what we use, this is how we do it, and this is the one way. So I see, again, it gets back to that thing where there's a lot of options today. They say, oh, there's no competition. We don't really have to do anything creative because we're in government. There's tons of competition. And we see it all the time. We see people coming in and saying, oh, we're going to outsource part of that because they run that really well, that organization, or we're going to create a digital transformation agency, right, which is different, right? There's a lot of competition to traditional IT if they don't transform. And I think they're really starting to see that now. So like I said, it's the CIO has to step up, but it can't just be that CIO. They have to have the people underneath them that are that business savvy, that next level down, even 2 levels down, have to be able to have those business conversations now.
Yeah, I think it's a really good point. So I want to kind of double click on something that you talked about, and that's, if you don't transform, right? So what if IT decides to just, continue status quo, not change anything, continue doing things the old way? What is that impact on the organization?
So what I've been seeing lately, in quite a few, both at the state, the county, and the city levels, there's a lot of examples of that's okay, right? The IT can do that. IT might not be my department that I'm going to entrust with my digital transformation. And a lot of times what we see is other organizations, like I said before, being spun up, where we see a new deputy director of digital transformation or a new deputy director of digital innovation, and they're getting their own orgs underneath them, and then IT is more of an org that's being tasked with supporting them, right, supporting their org. So they're bringing up business people in different areas that can have those business conversations and satisfy the business requirements and own the business services, as opposed to it happening within IT. And sometimes, they move a lot faster like that because you don't have to change this thing that you've been doing the same way for 30 years. Instead, you just kind of start fresh over here and then move the people you need over there, or use that as an organization. So, and then of course, there's still outsourcing. I see that at quite a few counties and cities, especially in areas where it's hard to bring people in, to recruit people. So we see an especially difficult challenge with a lot of people trying to get, the people that are savvy enough, right, to fill these roles, to live on in those both worlds, the business conversation along with the IT conversation.
Absolutely. So what about governance? When you think about, managing portfolios and kind of the historical governance process, how does all that shift in this new IT leadership?
Yeah, that's interesting because we get brought into that all the time, and it's so challenging because you have your application portfolios, and people are used to doing application portfolio management. Some of them that have enterprise architect practices, that's a lot of where the EAs come in, is what apps are we buying and keeping in our portfolio. Then there's your project portfolios, and now you have your digital service portfolios, and then they map up the capabilities, which is in another portfolio, and then there's a catalog, a portfolio inside your catalog. So a lot of what we're seeing is there's a big trend now for digital products. And if you look at some of the standards committees like IT for IT and ITIL, they're talking about the digital products. And I think that's really where you're landing, is more of that top-down focus from the service we're delivering, as opposed to all the technologies we're stacking up in the back end that could potentially deliver services, coming at it from bottom up. We're more coming at it from the business side in, and focusing more on those portfolios.
In our final remaining time, I'd love for you to maybe lay out some of your thoughts on, where to start. So if you're an existing leader today, what's the best starting point for you when it comes to embracing this new evolved role of IT?
If it gets back to it, it's funny, Dustin, it's really just getting back to what the promise of ITIL back in the day, what everybody wanted, right, is I want to get really focused, laser focused on services that I'm delivering. And I want everything else to be in support of that, whether we're doing risk mitigation, whether we're doing security, whether we're doing, and I think it has to get back to that focus. A lot of people did ITIL and they're like, oh, I got incidents and problems working. It's like, no, you're right, you're just scratching the surface. And a lot of people are high-fiving because we have incidents and requests separate instead of all being on one ticket. And it's really getting back to, everything when a problem comes in, or when a project comes in, or when a demand comes in, it's all on behalf of a service that's happening on the other side. And I think once people realize that, the digital economy is all built around digital services, and that's your sole role as IT, is every dollar you spend and every person you hire should point to a service that you're supporting. And I think that's really where the mindset that everybody needs to get in. instead of, that technology mindset that of the past.
And then for those that are aspiring to get into IT leadership roles, what should they do?
Get a business background, get some sort of business background with your IT background, and being able to live in both those worlds. I think that's going to be the key role, because it is going to be all about, a huge selection, right? The person that wants that service, the consumer, or the one that's bringing the service in on behalf of the consumer, is in total control. At any time in the future, they should be able to swap out that delivery part of the service and say, I'm using this instead because it's better. And we're getting there very quickly, way quicker than we expected, right? We expected apps to live on for a long time, but now we're seeing where that is becoming that piece where that service, we have the management layer of the service, and then how we deliver that service, just chuck it out and bring a new one in if there's a better one out there. So I think that's the mindset you have to be in. And I think that's where we're going to see all this moving to, is a much more flexible environment to let people deliver these things.
Absolutely. Well, exciting times that we're in. And as you said, I mean, so much has changed, but it's a great way to reimagine what's possible in IT. John, thanks so much for joining us. And thanks to ServiceNow for helping make this fireside chat possible.
Thanks for hosting, Dustin. I really appreciate it.
Absolutely.